water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast that explores solutions for sustainability and equity in water. I'm the host, Travis Loop. This is episode number 204, Catching the King Tides. King tides are the highest high tides of the year, and they are increasing due to factors such as rising sea levels, coastal erosion, and land subsidence. Communities are experiencing more flooding from king tides, posing a variety of challenges and hazards. This episode explores a collaboration between the North Carolina King Tides Project and Wetlands Watch that utilizes digital tools and citizen science to study these events. Gabi Kinney, the Community Engagement Project Manager for Wetlands Watch, explains how innovative apps and community engagement are used to gather crucial data during king tides. This information enhances understanding and preparedness for future challenges associated with sea level rise and flooding. Gabi also discusses how communities are responding to these evolving coastal conditions and their efforts to build resilience.
You're in the water loop.
Gabi, excited to be here to talk to you about king tides.
Yes.
I think it's been something in the news more, even on social media more, so hopefully more people are hearing about it.
Yep.
But king tides, what are these?
Yeah, so king tides, they typically happen, they have 2 seasons each year. So we have a spring and a fall king tide season. When you look at the orbital path of a moon, you can see that it's kind of oval shaped. And we call them, it's a perigean event. So the place in the moon's orbit when it's closest to Earth, and that gravitational pull, because it's closest to Earth, brings our tides inland more. So that gravitational pull is actually bringing these tides inland. And that's why we call them king tides, is they're kind of superior to all of the other tides. And our Catch the King logo, I don't know if the camera can see this, but it's an Elvis because he's the king.
The king, yeah.
Yeah.
So king tides are something that's been around because this Earth Moon tidal process has been around for forever, but they are on the increase now, right? There's the height, if you will, of the king tides. The places that the water's going is changing. What's going on?
Yes, so we study king tides because they're tied to the phenomenon of sea level rise and climate change, climate-driven sea level rise. So sea level rise occurs because as the climate warms and as the Earth warms, our ice glaciers are melting. Everybody has seen the really sad video of the polar bear on the floating ice sheet. Our ice caps are melting, our glaciers are melting. At the same time, ocean water is literally expanding because it's getting warmer. So we're seeing more water in our oceans, which is literally, if you think about it like a bathtub, is spilling over onto the geography of the land. So we're seeing this natural, human, obviously accelerated cause of sea level rise, bringing more water to our streets, in addition to the normal tidal cycle. So we get these astronomical events that happen each spring and fall, but those are becoming higher because sea level rise is continuing to increase with climate change. So it's all kind of interrelated in that way.
Yeah, and so there's places around the country that are a little more vulnerable, maybe where sea level rise is happening faster or the pace of it is accelerating, low-lying areas, variety of factors, right?
Yeah.
Definitely think of the Norfolk Tidewater area in Virginia where you're based. It's happening here along the North Carolina coast, South Florida, New Orleans, right? These are some of the hot spots for it. So people, what I think is important, are seeing king tides on sunny days. This is not a weather-driven event.
Right.
That certainly can amplify the impact. But like today, we're sitting here in Riceville Beach, sunny, beautiful day, water higher than it normally ever is.
Yes. Yeah, it is a really interesting yet slow phenomenon that is ramping up, I think, in more recent times. The awareness piece is that people are opening their front doorstep on a sunny day and they're seeing floodwaters just right in their front yard. That can have a lot of implications. It impacts how kids get to school. It impacts how the survivability of your front lawn grass to salt water, and all of these just really intense things. So it is ramping up. It's something that we're hoping gains more attention in the adaptation space. That local governments start talking with their residents about how floodwaters are affecting them. And it can be a real component of how we keep people safe and keep those ecosystems on the coast alive, so that we give them room to kind of get away from that sea level rise as well.
Yeah, I remember when I lived in Annapolis, Maryland, they have this sunny day flooding, king tides, and they would send a message. We had to go a different way to my kid's school to pick them up because down at the city dock area it was flooded out.
Yes.
So we had to take a long way.
Yep.
What are the other, I guess, immediate local impacts, right? People having to go different ways, but why else are these problematic right now?
Yeah, there's several different ones. Commutes and travel are a huge one because everybody's got to get to work, just work and school. We're seeing saltwater intrusion, again, affecting a lot of people's yards, affecting some of our like forested areas, these places that really help buffer wave action, even just our wetlands all along the coast. As sea level rise comes in, if there's nowhere for those wetlands to go, they just kind of drown in place. So we lose their buffering capability, we lose their wave action buffering, we lose their water quality features, we lose their ability to be nursery habitat, all of these really wonderful things that our wetlands do. And of course I'm biased because we're Wetlands Watch. But there is, at the community scale, it's about how does the infrastructure hold up? How are the roads that aren't doing so well, how are they handling the flooding? What about bridges? Do we need to raise our bridges? Do we need to elevate our homes? And the FEMA program also does like the buyouts and relocations. Are there properties that have been frequently flooded that can just no longer stand, or is it economical for people to stay in homes that have been frequently flooded? And so those are some of the kind of things that we're thinking about. There's a lot of work to be done in the adaptation space in terms of how we communicate this risk to people. A lot of people know that flooding's happening, they see it, it's a thing. But in terms of what it means for them directly, it can be a little more nuanced. If you have kids that go to school, that's one thing, but how do you think about the way that you live? What's your home going to look like in 2050 if you live right on the coast? And all of that. So we're just kind of emerging into that planning landscape of what do we do next and how do we get ahead of it with these projections that are coming out for sea level rise in the future.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slow moving crisis. Yes. Right? It's happening, but it's you can see it coming. Talk about what you all are doing to study this, especially along the Chesapeake Bay, that coastal Virginia, coastal North Carolina. What are you doing? Yeah,
so we run a program called Catch the King, and it is a community science mapping event. So in 2015, we developed an app called the Sea Level Rise app. It's a mobile tool right in the hands of any individual person, and it actually lets folks go out and document the flooding happening in their neighborhood. So what they can do is when they download and register for the app, they have a tool button that lets them drop an individual GPS pin as they walk along the outer line of a flood zone. So if you see flooding in your neighborhood, put some muck boots on, take the app out, and walk about every 5 steps or so, you drop a GPS pin. And you try to map the entire extent of that flood line. So what it's doing is showing us not only where the flooding is happening, but how far it's coming inland. We can do it on the coastline and work with the rack line and the tide line that comes in, but we can also work with things like backed up storm drains or these kind of inlet areas that get the flooding from local estuaries and wetlands that are coming in. And we can map those kind of inlets and inundation spots. And with all of this data, we are working with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science to validate their flood prediction models. So they have this model called Tide Watch, and it models that kind of high tide tidal variation. It shows you how far the flooding is predicted to come inland based on their models. And they take all of our annual Catch the King data and actually validate where those floodwaters are coming in. So where do we collect it on the day versus where the model said it was going to come in? Our researchers are impeccably smart and know much more than I do about how all that data works. But they can go in and we're realizing that this kind of community collected data can be a really valuable tool in academic research, in planning and modeling for this sort of thing. In the future, working with things like the Chesapeake Bay goals, working in North Carolina, we actually received funding from NOAA to expand Catch the King. It was originally a Virginia-based project, but I'm a UNC Wilmington alum, and I've been through several hurricanes in this area. I've seen the flooding impacts, especially downtown, and we know that this is a real threat here. And so I thought, what better option than to come work with some of the organizations already doing wonderful tide monitoring work here in North Carolina to extend it south. So there's much more room for opportunity to get this data in the right hands and integrate it into programs that are already happening, tide monitoring programs, resilience building programs. And so, yeah, we're just seeing where it goes from here. That funding came from NOAA, and it's kind of a pilot project this year, but we're hoping it grows. Goes from here.
There's so much attention on this, not just in the mid-Atlantic here, but growing up and down the eastern seaboard and the Gulf Coast and everything. I just want to kind of touch on the solution part or the adaptation part a little more. So you're getting this great data, it's feeding into these programs. So that is a great accomplishment, a great solution, a great tool. It's raising awareness of people. What are some of the ways that communities then can adapt to these king tides? Yes, there's got to be the big fight against climate change and sea level rise. That's a big picture thing. But at the really local level, communities that are impacted by king tides, what can they do? What are they doing?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple different, and I'm going to try to remember the three kind of steps that we do. So retreat is one, and retreat can be a really scary term, but it essentially means facilitating the migration of people further inland. That can happen at the parcel level. Folks can choose to move from their homes and move further inland. Again, it's a very scary topic to think about having to leave your home. It's not something that many people want to do, especially living on the beautiful coast. So that's one option, and we're not seeing a whole lot there, again, because that whole retreat process can be so difficult. Elevating homes is one. Of course, some cities have a base flood elevation requirement, so elevating homes to that standard and new development being built to that standard is another one. We can also take down structures on the coast and return it to open space and green space, again, to restore the kind of ecosystem functions and the protections of the wetlands. And then there's this defense element. So we can build up our coasts to adapt to this. One of the things we can do is implement green infrastructure. So in an area where we're noticing a lot of floodwaters, instead of building a hard surface like a wall, can we install a living shoreline and establish that community of plants to help attenuate the water? Can we implement storm water retention practices? So if we're seeing these huge rain bomb events, and again, that flooding that we study is not just tidal, these climate change driven rainfall events too, and hurricanes getting more intense are causing a lot of flooding in the streets. And so can we install these kind of natural retention practices that hold that water and take that water in, installing pervious surfaces where that rainwater can go straight through the pavement? Those kinds of things are things we can do to help build defense of these things and integrate it into the community rather than encouraging folks to just move. There's so many more moving pieces there to think about.
Sure. I guess lastly, if people want to learn more about king tides and learn more about the Catch the King kind of initiative, where can they go to do that? Yeah,
we have a website for Catch the King. It's just wetlandswatch.org/catchtheking, all lowercase. And that's where we host a lot of our Virginia-based stuff, but there's a little tab on the left that lets you click through to North Carolina, as well as some background on our Sea Level Rise app. Other than that, they're welcome to reach out to me. I'm sure my phone number and email will be on there. And download the Sea Level Rise app, find the tutorial guides out there. They're floating around on our website. Attend a training event if you hear of one in your area. Again, we're piloting this in North Carolina, so if you hear of us, come on out. Sometimes we just take some strolls on the beach and it's a good time. Other than that, just stay alert, take photos of any flooding that you see, and stay aware.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Waterloop.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. To find all episodes, sign up for email updates, and connect on social media, visit waterloop.org.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.